Welcome everybody to Eye of the Serpent Tarot for another deck creator interview. Today I'm delighted to talk to a fellow Aussie, Sophie Elvari, about her amazing deck, the Deeper Self Oracle. I'll just show you the cover because it's a really impressive cover. This is an amazing deck. I jumped on it instantly when I saw it in Etsy because it is a deck that's designed for you to train your own intuition and to really connect to your own intuition, which makes it a really interesting deck to use in pick a card readings and individual tarot readings and so forth. So we'll explore quite a lot of that as we go through the interview. And we will, at the end of the reading, I'll pull some cards from the deck and we'll be talking through how to use the deck. Sophie will show you how to use it and tap into your intuition, and I'll take her guidance and do it and all that kind of thing. Just so that everybody knows, the day after this interview publishes, I have actually filmed a pick a card using this deck already because, frankly, I couldn't wait. I wanted to get into it. Reads like a dream, really brilliant deck for pick a card reading. So hopefully you'll check that out as well. But with no further ado, welcome, Sophie, to Eye of the Serpent Tarot.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Now, just so people know, you're sitting in a car for a particular reason, which is that you're kind of mid-transition in your own life. If you wanted quickly just say about that, because that's why I'll be the one showing the cards rather than the tech creator showing the cards. So do you want to let people know?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm in probably the biggest transition of my life right now. My partner and I have just, as of 2 days ago, moved out of our home and are currently building up our Land Cruiser, not this car that I'm in, but our other one, to go and travel Australia and live on the road. So we as of 2 days ago, we don't have a home and all our belongings are packed up all over the shop. And we're finishing off this car build over the next week to go on a big adventure.
Brilliant. So just a question related to that. So I will have your Etsy store in the description box
Mhm.
below. Will there be any delay do people sort of need to understand that there's a period of time when you may not be able to send decks, or is it you're still going to be able to kind of coordinate that?
I'll still be able to coordinate decks. So I have some with me that I'll be taking on the road. And I also am going to be leaving some either with friends or at my parents' place. So if there's ever a point in time where I'm remote and I'm not
Mhm.
able to get to post office regularly, then they'll be taking orders for that amount of time.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's important because I think I would be surprised if quite a few of you are interested in getting this deck once you've seen it in action. So, giving that background so that people know why you're sitting in a car and
Yeah.
all that kind of thing, and the big stuff going on in your life. Tell us a little bit more broadly, just as a sort of icebreaker, I guess, about your spiritual and artistic journey and how it led you to create a wonderful deck like this.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing art since I could remember, really. I've always drawn, I've always created. And then I got into card reading probably about maybe 8 years ago now. And I just fell in love with it so quickly. That was kind of the start of my spiritual journey. And I'm obsessed with symbolism. I always have been. And I love seeing symbolism in all different areas of life. So for someone who's done art for so long and then became so passionate about card reading, it felt like a no-brainer. It was interesting. I had wanted to create this deck for so many years and it just wasn't channeling through. I couldn't get the design right. I couldn't get it. And I was really frustrated for a really long amount of time because I was like, I just feel like I'm meant to create this. And so I let it go. I surrendered it to the universe. And I was like, when it's meant to happen, it will happen. And then one day it just hit
Mm-hmm.
everything that it was meant to be, the style, the vibe, the name, the intention, everything just came through so quickly. And I mean, I was at a stage of my life where I had the time and the
Mm-hmm.
resources to create the deck. I'd been gifted an iPad for my birthday,
Uh-huh.
just before that. And yeah, it was my first experience creating more digital art because they are hand drawn but on an iPad. So that was a new thing for me. And yeah, it felt like a no-brainer suddenly and then could come through.
That's amazing. I do find that with sort of artistic things, and I write, and I find that when I'm going to write something like a novel, when I will actually finish it,
Mm,
the whole story comes to me in about 5 minutes. Like that's the
yeah,
way of knowing. If I just have a general
yeah,
idea, I just never finish it. So it's
yeah,
like something is ready to be born, really, isn't it? That's
yeah,
what you're
yeah.
describing. So you say that you want this deck to help people train their intuition. As I say, that's one of the things that
Mhm.
really drew me to that. I can definitely see how it would, even from using
Mm.
it so far. What led you to that choice? Why did you think I want to have something that people can train their intuition with?
So something that I've noticed along my spiritual journey and my connection to like spiritual communities is people can sometimes give their power away a little bit to tools like tarot and other divination practices. And while I think these practices are very magical and
Mm.
amazing, like what's even more magical and amazing is yourself and
Mm.
it's your ability to pull messages out of things, not necessarily the things themselves so much. And I even noticed myself do this. Sometimes I'd pick oracle cards and read the name of the card and then be like, okay, cool, that was my message and move on, rather than like really sit with it and see
Mm.
how I'm responding to it. And I'd watch other people do that with cards as well, not really take in the image and just see a meaning and be like, oh wow, like this card is so magical. It's like we are the magical ones. We have so much power inside of us. And I pretty much everything that I do with my work and with my clients is about bringing people back to their power and
Mhm.
their connection with themselves and their ability to be their own guide and not give their power away.
Brilliant. I love that. And as I say, it works really interestingly. With the picker card, I've kind of built a sort of structure into it in that I'll talk about what I get, but I'll sort of say to
Mhm.
people either before or after you listen to that, pause the video, do it yourself. And then I move to the guidebook. Now, this is the other sort of side of this. You do actually have a guidebook
Yeah.
and it goes into the choices artistically and some of the
Yeah.
meanings. So how did you sort of see those two things balance? Like one hand, the very kind of ephemeral, everybody kind of gets what they get. And then there is actually a meaning as well. How did you balance that?
So I like it to have the option. People can choose one or the other, or people can do both. And one way that I like to encourage people to use the deck is to pull a card. And so, say they ask a question and then they pull a card, their what they pull out of that image is the answer to their question, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what's in their subconscious. That's what their intuition is trying to tell them. And then the guidebook is sort of guidance of like, okay, this is what you can actually do about that. So that's the way that the two connect. And it's really interesting. Sometimes the messages and meanings that people pull out of the card are really similar to what's in the
Mm-hmm.
book, and sometimes they're really different.
Mm.
And I encourage people, if they are pulling their own meanings and then reading my meaning, to find a way to connect the two together and not be like, oh, I got that wrong,
Yeah.
you know? And that's something that I
Yeah.
really hope people can understand and be like, okay, so this was my meaning, and then how can I marry these two together?
That makes a lot of sense. That's sort of how what I found, because quite often I did read sort of different things to what was in the
Mm,
guidebook. But what I sort of said in the picker card, and I've used this now for quite a few private readings. People really enjoy it in the private readings.
mm,
And I've said, look, it's not like there's a right or wrong here. It's just let's have a look in the guidebook, having gone through our own exploration, and
yeah,
let's say here's some additional things, additional
yeah.
symbols, additional things to sort of throw into the mix and take what resonates and leave the rest of it, as we often say in picker cards. So that's really interesting. It's fascinating that you said a couple of things. One is that, you always love symbolism, because that's pretty obvious. Like, your symbols. That was the other thing I thought when I looked at the various cards that you could see on the Etsy thing. I thought, yeah, this person knows her esoteric symbolism.
Hmm.
But then you also said channeled. So I'm sort of like interested in the balance of that. How much did you consciously think about esoteric symbolism that you knew about, and then how much was channeled? And I'll actually show a card to give an example
Yeah.
why I asked that. So this card, which
Mm,
happens to be card number one. When I've read this, and it's come up quite a bit in readings, I think it says something about my collective.
mm,
I saw this almost like the marriage of the high priestess and the magician. Now, I won't go into what the guidebook says about it or whatever,
mm,
but to me, I felt like the pillars were like the pillars that are typically in the high priestess, the figure in the center, particularly with the almost Baphomet like head and all that kind of thing, felt like the magician. The various sort of it was kind of not exactly the elements, but a bit like the elements sort of around him and so forth. So I thought, yeah, this and some other ones in the deck, I thought, you know what you're dealing with here. So
mm.
So maybe using that as an example, like how much of that was conscious about the symbolism and how much was channeling?
So, for example, the majority of oh, my phone just wigged out for a second.
That's
The
okay.
majority
You're still with us, so it's all good.
Okay, so for example, the hand with the cloud and the cup, that was a conscious choice
Mm-hmm.
include from tarot, and I knew that that was from tarot. Again, tarot is something I've read and studied for some time.
Mm.
So that part of it was conscious, but then for example, the pillars, I could definitely say they would be influenced by tarot, but that wasn't a conscious
Right.
decision.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
some of it was, some of it was would have just naturally come through without me realizing. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, a bit of both.
Bit of both, but maybe primarily channeled by the sounds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I created the deck, as I sort of said before, so much of it just came through so quickly. And I wrote out the names of pretty much all the cards straight away. And then when I went to do each one, the image really appeared in my mind very quickly, the
Yeah.
overall of it. And I would just draw and not really be thinking like, oh, okay, now I what's something that matches here? I'm gonna add this. My hand was just guided to do the specific things. And I knew, like I started just drawing this hand and immediately I was like, oh yeah, like I want this to be from tarot and put the cup in there. And but it was such a flow state, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I'm just very quickly, people are probably noticing that I'm looking down. I'm just very quickly
Mm.
wanting to just draw a couple of cards out to show some other stuff about the esoteric symbolism or things that sort of struck me along these lines. And so one is that like I got a lot of energy around chakra sort of stuff, like that felt like the heart chakra and so forth.
Yeah,
So the chakras are shown in this. So that I'll
yeah,
just give some other cards for people to see. And then
yeah,
we've got fairly clearly the Ouroboros, which I really love seeing. So
yeah,
kind of karma and life and death and
yeah,
rebirth and all of that
yeah,
kind of thing. But then here's one that didn't strike me as being like particularly necessary esoteric stuff, but like really, really makes you think. It's just gives another example of like the kind of
yeah,
various facets of people and so forth. So
yeah.
I just thought I'd show a few so that people can see those, particularly conscious of the fact
Mhm.
that with your current sort of moving state, you don't have a copy of the deck with you.
Yeah,
So yeah, primarily channeled, but you're drawing from a lexicon. Like you obviously know your
yeah,
spiritual.
yeah, from everything. And I really wanted to include everything that I study, everything that I'm passionate about, and bring it all together rather than have it focus solely based on tarot or on the chakras, but just pull it all in when it seemed fit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's excellent. It's interesting, just as a bit of an aside, it makes me think of another way to use the deck because I used to find back in the day when I did sort of guided meditations or whatever, I'd see all these symbols and I didn't actually know what they were about. Like this is many, many years ago, and they turned out to be the alchemical process. I
Mm.
didn't know. So
Wow.
I think it's an interesting educative thing as well too, because there is such a lexicon in here, because there are a lot of esoteric symbols that if you feel particularly, this is for anybody who gets a deck, uses it, or I read for you with it or whatever, if a symbol really draws you, I think it's worth looking it up because I think you often find like maybe it's something from a past life or it's knowledge that you have or whatever, which like has so many layers in this deck for how you can use it, which is wonderful. So
Yeah.
the artwork itself is beautiful. It's very bright. So was color a really big conscious decision about what you wanted to do with this?
Yeah. So I wanted a deck that from the outside almost bordered on like intimidating a little bit, like with the heavy black.
Mm-hmm.
Myself and like my style. I never really connected with a lot of spiritual artwork because it's very
Yeah.
like fairies and angels, and which is like they're stunning and beautiful, but it's not really an accurate representation of how I've made art or like
Mhm.
clothes that I wear and just my style. So I wanted something that really stood out and kind of drew people's interest. And it's about the deeper self, so creating the box to be quite dark and having a lot of like black backgrounds in the card was important to represent that deeper self connection. And then having the bright colors as a contrast to represent pulling all the light and the goodness
Mm-hmm.
out of the dark and having that balance, and to kind of encourage people, like, when you go into the darkness, color can be found and good
Mm.
things can be found there, and you can be quite surprised with what you're found there, because a lot of the time if people just see the deck, they don't expect the cards to be that colorful,
Yeah.
and that's the exact way that I think going into your shadows is.
I think that's true, and I mean it's really powerful. I mean, I think sort of, again, artistically, just holding up another card just randomly. I always think that kind of dark background with color, it really makes the color pop too.
Yeah.
I'm always really drawn to decks that have that. The other thing that it makes me think of is like, to what degree did you see this? I mean, calling it Deeper Self and the artwork that you've done as a kind of a shadow deck, or a deck to explore the kind of getting below the surface of what we consciously think? Like, was that a conscious decision as well?
Yeah, like I knew that from the get-go, that my intention was to help people really dig deep, and cards have such a power to do that, and I guess I wanted to see sort of how far I could push it, and that's why in the guidebook I just kept adding things as well. As I was initially just going to write a meaning for each card, and I was like, okay, nah, go deeper. And then so I spoke about the specific imagery, and I was like, okay, how can I go deeper? And then put
Mhm.
the additional meanings and the reflection prompts and the sigils and the affirmation, and I really just wanted to keep pushing and keep going deeper.
It's like peeling an onion, isn't it? You think you get to the core and think, oh no, there's another bit
Yeah.
that we can get. So
Yeah.
do you use it for yourself? I mean, like, it's interesting with something that is so individual and so symbolic. Do you find you can use it, or is it the fact that you were the creator make it a little bit hard?
I do use it for myself a lot,
Mhm.
actually. It's interesting. When I first got it back, when production started, I pulled, I think, 3 cards for myself, and they, like, I got schooled by my own deck. Like, it was like, it was not messing around. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, it works for me too. Cool. And it really just like called me out so
Mhm.
hard. And that was really funny. And then I didn't use it for quite some time, actually. I don't know what it was, but I was just so excited seeing it being received by other people,
Mhm.
and I thought, okay, maybe like I've gotten what I need out from it. So I didn't use it for some time, but in the past maybe 2 months, I've been drawn back to it, and it's it connects with me on such a deep level.
Mhm.
But it's funny because I forget that I like wrote them when I'm reading through
Right.
the
Okay.
guidebook.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wrote this like because I was in such a channeled state. Like the guidebook,
Mhm.
I wrote very quickly, actually. So when I'm reading through the cards, I'm like, wait, I wrote this? No, I channeled this. I don't remember writing this.
That's what channeling feels like, I think. I find that with,
Yeah,
I think I channel when I read, and like people will go, oh, you said this and this. And I'll go, I don't remember the reading. It's not that I don't care about you. I don't remember. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, crazy.
that's what channeling's like. So are you going to do any other decks? Like, and I never like to pressure people with this, but when I like people's work, I always like to hear they're going to do other stuff. So are you at all thinking about doing that, or is this sort of like you've got so much going on in your life at the moment, or where are you at with that?
I definitely want to create another deck,
Yeah.
but I don't think it will happen for, I don't know, for some time. I could see maybe next year. Like, I have the urge in me so much, but and I've got different ideas, but none that are like, yes, this is the idea. Now is the time. I don't know if you know much about human design, but I'm a generator, and my
Ah,
strategy is to
okay.
respond.
Mm-hmm.
So to respond to my environment, and that's kind of why the deck didn't work for so long. I spent so many years wanting to create it, but it not coming through because I had come up with the idea and I wanted to put it out there, but I had to wait until basically a friend said to me, like, you should make an oracle card deck. And I was like, I've tried. It doesn't work. But then after she said that, I tried again and it just flowed. So I'm kind of here with ideas and knowing that it's going to happen at some point, but sort of waiting for the world around me to give me that nudge to be like, okay, now it's time. And I have a lot of other things I'm working on at the moment. I spent a lot of time studying astrology,
Oh,
and so much of my work is about helping people deeply explore themselves and understand themselves and how to find their purpose in this life. So at the moment, I've been focusing on my client sessions a lot
mhm.
and reading their astrology charts, but from a slightly different standpoint. I don't like doing overall birth charts that are just like, here, let me tell you how you are, which you
Yeah.
already probably know about yourself, but really pulling out like your soul's journey.
Wow.
And I'm trying to, at the moment, create little programs for people that they can purchase and go through these journeys on their own, because not everyone can afford one-on-one sessions. And
Yeah.
obviously, my time is limited, so I can only serve a certain number of people in that way anyway. So, my current project is creating these sort of like masterclasses, workshops that people can just purchase for a much more reduced price than a one-on-one session, and they can go through this self-exploration, soul's purpose exploration on their own.
Wonderful. I might hit you up for a reading at some point
Yeah,
because
I'd love
I grew up with astrologers. My mother was an astrologer,
that.
an amateur astrologer. My brother was a professional astrologer, but neither of
Yeah,
them are with us anymore.
yeah,
And people often ask me, do you know a good astrologer? And I'm thinking like, I knew my brother, but so maybe, at some point when you're a bit more settled and you've got time, let me know. I
yeah,
might
I would love.
purchase a reading from you because that sounds really interesting. It sounds like a really interesting way of looking at charts. My brother looked at harmonics and like the different sort of soul
Mm.
levels and stuff with harmonics and looked at fixed stars and things like that. So always interested in that more cutting edge astrology. So I didn't know that. That's interesting that that came up. A little bit of self-interest coming
Yeah.
in there. So okay. So actually I want to ask you one other thing. Would you ever do something like a tarot deck, or are you like it needs to be sort of artistic and different and from a theme, or would you ever do something like a tarot deck?
I'm not quite sure. I've never been called to do a
Mm-hmm.
tarot deck, and even to be honest, I read a lot of tarot, but I've never been called to purchase anything other than the original Rider-Waite
Yep.
tarot deck.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think
Yeah,
so.
and
But also,
it's
never say never.
never say
Never.
never, but like, yeah, it doesn't. I was just curious because it made me think that maybe that would be the case because it seems like you're very much an artist and very expressive, and it's sort of like, and you strike me even with the way that you spoke about astrology that you're kind of a little bit outside of the box. But I was
Mm.
just curious as to whether you would, because obviously a great artist like you would make a great deck if you wanted to.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks.
So what else? What have I not touched upon before we get into like the collective sort of readings? What have I not touched upon about the deck that you would like to tell people?
I think, well, I don't know. You've asked some really great questions. I
Oh,
really
good.
to these. I think you've covered a lot. Um, I guess I just really want people watching to, and we touched on this at the start, but to really remember their power and remember that they are the powerful thing when they are engaging in these tools and practices. And I've gained so much like amazing response from people saying like, this deck is incredible, like I got out all these messages like, the deck is incredible, the deck is incredible. And I'm like, well, thank you so much, but like, you pulled those meanings out, your
Mhm.
intuition showed you that, so thank you for saying that, but like, you're incredible. So I just, that's what I want to emphasize so much throughout this process.
Yeah, and as I say, I think the deck works like a dream for that. So it's so interesting, and you get so much out of it. And I found because I've had certain cards that have come up in a few different things, and every time I get something different out of it, which is like fits in with the kind of theme or the energy of the reading in general. So it's really really good like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to put your Etsy thing in the description box. So you on any other social media?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram, Sophie Elvari, and I also have a website, which is sophieelvari.com. And on there, you can read about coaching offerings. I have a shop there. There's a lot on that website, actually. I've got a couple of free resources and a bunch more free resources coming later this year, actually. So that's kind of the one-stop shop for it all.
Brilliant. So let's do a couple of collective readings so that people sort of can see it going. So I did send everybody, I did send a couple of potential questions through to Sophie, just to make sure she thought it was the right sort of question. She hasn't said no, so I presume they're okay.
Yeah,
So what we're going to do is I'm going to draw a couple of cards, one at a time for each of the questions. So we'll go kind of twice through on each question with what we get. And what we'll do is I'll say what the question is that I draw for. And then Sophie will have a bit of a talk about how to connect in with it, so that while we're doing this, I'll hold it up. You're doing that. So you actually go through that experience. And then I will say, okay, this is what I get for what it's worth on the questions as well. So I think that should work quite well. So the first question is, what deep intuitive messages are the collective's spirit teams trying to surface for us now? So what are they really trying to bring up for this collective? So the first card I get is, oh, lovely. So talk us through how to connect with that, Sophie.
So I like to guide people through a few questions. And the first one would be, what immediate feeling do you get looking at this card? What emotions come up for you? Where in your body do you feel this? Are there any words that immediately spring to mind when you do look at this? Our body holds so much wisdom, so much knowledge, and so much guidance. So really tapping into your physical body and grounding into it to see what sensations you're feeling when you look at this image.
Okay.
And
So, sorry, go on.
yeah, no, that's okay. And then next, I'd like to I've got someone waving at me. I've got
All
a name.
right.
And next, figure out which symbol you're the most drawn towards. Maybe it's the color bursting out of the person. Maybe it's the roots. Maybe it's the sun. And then ask yourself, like, why does this stand out? What does this remind me of? And then lastly, I like people to create a bit of a story about what's happening here. And quite often this story can show you what your subconscious feels about the question that has just been asked.
Brilliant. So sorry, everybody. I think you saw the ring light on it because I had to change the movement for it. So for me, what I would see in that, thinking about the question about what's unsurfacing, the first thing that really struck me was the colors coming out, what looks like the kind of either the solar plexus, around about the sacral chakra or the solar plexus chakra. So I feel like that is our creativity and our personal power kind of coming together, and all the colors show the diversity of skills and abilities in this collective that the collective would like to bring up. Then I saw the roots and I thought, this is grounded. This is something that is deeply connected to the earth. This is something deeply connected, say, to ancestral lines, that kind of energy for the collective. And then I saw the sun. So I sort of saw them in like 1, 2, 3. So you start with the burst of creative energy, you ground it, you understand how it is in kind of like your family, your history, the world, your environment. And then the sun to me is like, that's it bursting into being. Like once you've done those two things, it bursts into being, is kind of the energy I get. So I think this is trying to say, let's look at a very creative energy that needs to be surfaced. So I'll draw a second card. And everybody, when I do that, so that Sophie doesn't have to say the same questions over again, just pause the video if you want to do your own thing. Ask those questions she talked about. What does it feel like? Where does it feel? You know, what are you seeing first? That kind of thing. And then unpause, and I'll talk about what I get with the second card. So the second card for this question about what deep intuitive messages. So we know there's something here about creativity and grounding that creativity in our environment or our family or whatever resonates. Then, oh my goodness, we get the artist in full. So everybody pause if they want to. But now, presuming you've unpaused or that you haven't, like that's creativity. That is creativity in its purest essence. Like it's everything that's sort of coming from the artist's pen. It's like once you've done that, you know, just go wild. I think is the answer. Is there
That's
anything
so
you'd add to that, Sophie?
there's something I would just like to point out that you did, which I haven't really thought about before, to be honest. And I just thought was really amazing was you talked about the order of what you noticed first, and then what you noticed second, what you noticed third, and how that was a reflection of kind of the steps that we're meant to take. I thought that was really amazing and is an amazing prompt to show people.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's the first question. Now, the second question, again, like just I'll hold it up, pause if you want to play, and then, then I'll say what I get. The second question is, what truth or key to the collective, can come up for the collective for their next big choice or their path ahead? So, like, what would be a key or a piece of sort of information or truth that would really help them? So, I've seen this one before. So everybody, again, pause if you need. What I get from this, and it is different to the guidebook, I'll let you know, but what I get from it is I when I first saw this card, I thought about the thing about the frog in slowly boiling water. So I felt like this is all the sort of energies that are on us at the moment, both the sort of very powerfully good and also the worrying ones. And it's sort of like, are we really able to fully understand? Are we just warming up, or are we going to boil over? So to me, and this is a sort of a sense of understanding where we are now so that we make good choices, is sort of what I would get from that. What would you get from that, Sophie, for this particular question?
So for me, what this means is, and especially for this question, like that we have a bit of a choice to be overtaken by the fear and the worries and the lack and the bad, or we have a choice to open our eyes and see the and where we are being helped and where we are being guided. And that is relatively resonant of what the guidebook says, but I think in this specific process, it's kind of just showing us that there is everything around us all the time, and it is up to us to consciously open ourselves up and face towards the parts of life that we do want to experience.
Brilliant. And there's that sort of sense of vulnerability with the person too. They're sort of naked there as well too. So
Yeah.
we're vulnerable to all of that. So I'll get a second card for this. So this is, like looking at understanding the complexity of the situation and choosing the light. I like that as a key. What else can we get? Oh, and then when you do, you get the gift. So the road to the present, the road to the gift, and then also what that does. So to me, that's telling me like the gifts of this collective, actually, like understanding when you're turning to the light and looking at the key is within you. You have the gift, and then you can radiate that out to others. The path is to understand your gifts, is what I would get from that. What would you get?
What I would get is, because at the start with the first card, you sort of said like you have a choice of where you want to look to open yourself up. And so when you do that, there are gifts awaiting you. You can to look at the positive and obviously not be toxically positive, feel all the things. But when you choose to try and see abundance is what you'll find.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I also, to me, that this part suggests to me that once you have it, you also then telegraph it to others. It's almost like a pay it forward energy as well too. You take
Yeah.
your gifts and you do them in service to others as well. So beautiful. So that shows you, everybody, how the deck works, and how you can kind of get layers upon layers in terms of the reading. So I hope that's excited people about the deck as much as I was. If so, as I say, if you're interested in it, the Etsy details for Sophie's store are in the description box below. So thank you, Sophie, for taking this time out, because I know you're mega busy, but I'm really, really thrilled to talk to you about it because it is such an exceptionally different deck. It's not just another tarot. Not that, I enjoyed talking to other tarot deck creators and all of that, but when you find something this unique, you really want to talk to the creator. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for having me in this crazy transition while I'm in my car and it's all happening.
Well,
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
I hope the transition is brilliant for you. I hope you enjoy the travel. I hope it inspires you to work out what your next deck is, because I'm selfish and I want another deck. but take your time. But I hope that everything goes well. We'll just quickly say goodbye to everybody here and just have a bit of a chat afterwards. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for
Thank you
watching.
so much.
Bye.